All living things need food to survive and to perform all of the other life functions. Food looks very differently from one organism to the next. For example, if you're looking at this lion, it is feeding off of another organism just by ripping off the meat um, of that organism and just eating it. Some organisms, such as plants, all they do is they make their own food by absorbing sunlight and water and carbon dioxide. So food looks very differently from one organism to the other in terms of eating it, but the basis of all of them, what type of food, what type of organism, is very, very similar. And in this lesson, we will look at that. An organism that makes its own food is said to be an autotrophic organism. You can see the word autotroph, or you can also see the word producers. And when you see these words, they all mean the same thing. What it simply means is that organisms that makes their own food, such as plants, algae, and a few bacteria, have the ability to synthesize means to make their own food. So autotrophic organisms make their own food. So what about organisms that cannot make their own food? They are termed heterotrophic or consumers. An heterotrophic organism is an organism that cannot make its own food, hence they depend on other organisms for feeding. For example, we have this amoeba, which is a single cellular organism, and this amoeba, what it does is that once it notices its food source, which is this is in red, the red circle, it will extend this part of its body and it will pull it into the cell. That's very simple. So simple organisms like amoeba, they feed that way. Other organisms such as this donkey, which is eating leaves, it will have to break the food down, they'll have to pass it through a number of organ systems, then transport it to the cells, and so forth. So it's a little bit more complex with multicellular organisms. But basically, they need to feed on another organism for energy. Heterotrophic organisms can be then divided into three classes, depending on what they feed on. And in middle school, you basically learn about these things. For example, a carnivore is an organism that eats only meat, or it feeds off of other animals. A herbivore is an organism that eats only plant materials. And an omnivore is an organism that eats both plants and animals. An example of a carnivore would be this shark that is feeding off of another fish. A herbivore would be this horse feeding off of grass, which is a plant. And an omnivore will be an organism such as this bear that is feeding off a fish, or it can eat other plant materials. So what does eating do for us? Or any organism, as a matter of fact. Eating does a number of things. First of all, if we eat something that contains protein, and you can get 6 things out of eating. You can get proteins, you can get carbohydrates, lipids, vitamins, minerals, or water. And each one of these perform a different function and do a different job or task in our body. For example, proteins. And we're going to look at proteins right now. Proteins help us with growth, repair, and maintenance. So for whenever you have a cut, a scratch, or a damaged cell or tissue, basically proteins help to repair or build these cells. It also helps in growing. So if I was to ask you in an exam, of all the 6 types of substance you can get from eating, which one of them will help you to grow or is directly contribute to growing? And you will have to say proteins. Carbohydrates is our energy food. Um, Energy is used to perform all life functions, from moving to talking to having your transport system work. Everything that needs energy can be obtained from carbohydrates. Then we're going to look at fats or lipids. Lipids are used for insulation. Some organisms, such as seals that live in the very cold region, they need a layer of fat, which is often called blubber, to help their body maintain a balance of temperature. They help this with homeostasis, or use this for homeostasis. And fat basically provide insulation. Lipids also help to build the cell membrane or cell structure, and they also provide energy. So if you eat too much carbohydrates, basically what will happen is that it will store as or convert into lipids and store, and it's a secondary source of energy. We have vitamins. Vitamins are needed for chemical reaction in our body. So whatever chemical reaction happens in our body, vitamins are responsible for those. Minerals. Minerals are needed for strong bones, teeth, and for intra and extracellular functions, for things that are happening inside of the cell and out of the cell. And finally, water. Now 70 to 80% of our body contains a lot of water, or blood rather, and this is because our body needs a liquid medium to transport things, to pick up something from one place and carry it to the next. For example, you're eating, you chew your food, you break it into smaller pieces by digestion, it needs to be transported to the cell. So what does this? Is blood, or the circulatory system, and it contains a lot of water. So water helps to dissolve things or move things into our body. Organic versus inorganic. So, of all the things or all the different things you can get from feeding, that is water, vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats or lipids, they can be classified or grouped into different categories based on carbon and hydrogen bonds. Now, bonds means that these two elements are linked together. So, an organic substance contains the element carbon and hydrogen bonds. Carbon in science is written as a capital C, hydrogen is written as a capital H. Inorganic substance, they do not contain any carbon or hydrogen bonds. So let's look at the different, I would say, molecules that we can get from feeding, and we're going to classify them or put them into groups based on whatever have carbon-hydrogen bonds and don't. So the first molecule that you're looking at, and it looks very strange to you right now because they're all letters and lines, but you don't have to know or memorize this. I just want to point out, if you're looking from a scientific view, how is it, or a chemical view, how are they different? This molecule that you're looking at is a carbohydrate, the first one. And here's a carbon, here's a hydrogen, here's a carbon or hydrogen bond. So this is an organic molecule. Here, number 2 is a protein. As you can see, here is carbon and hydrogen bonds again, so it is organic. Here we have fats or lipids, and as you can see, there's hydrogen and carbon, HC, so it is organic. Here's water. There's H, but there's no C, so it is inorganic. Here is a vitamin. There's H and C, so it is organic. And here is a mineral. And there is Cl, there's Na, so there's no H and C, so it is inorganic. So far, of the 6 types of things or molecules you can get from food, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 organic, and 2 inorganic. So we have carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and vitamins are organic, minerals and water are inorganic. So we can classify these molecules that we get from food based on organic or inorganic, depending on their carbon or hydrogen bonds, but we can also classify them based on their size. So based on their size, macromolecules are molecules that are large in size. Macro means large. Micromolecules, micro means small. Micromolecules are vitamins and minerals. They're much smaller and needed in a smaller quantity also. Macromolecules are large molecules and they're needed in a larger quantity. Human food. Human food basically is similar because it contains carbohydrates, protein, fats, minerals, vitamins, and water as any food that is available on Earth for living organisms. However, human food is basically treated most of the time. Most of the time, you cook your food so that you can kill microorganisms, and microorganisms, microorganisms that can cause diseases. And you also cook food for flavor to improve the taste. So human food is basically processed in a way that we are trying to get rid of any type of things that can cause a disease, and also for cooking, for flavoring, sorry.